One more game for the Cubs to make it to the World Series. You're listening to the Baseball Talk Radio Show, sponsored by BaseballTalkRadio.com. Hello and welcome aboard the Baseball Talk Radio Show. Well, Gary, only one more game for the Chicago Cubs, and we've got another opponent for the 2016 World Series.
And two more for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Let's not forget that. Cubs still have to go through Kershaw and Rich Hill. So, if necessary, Rich Hill. It's not going to be an easy task to get there. It hasn't been an easy task for the Cubs to get there. And they've still got a little bit of a hill to climb there. Got to get past Kershaw. That's the main guy now.
Yeah, it's going to be a tremendous Game 6. As you said, Kershaw on the mound for the Dodgers. And the Cubbies haven't been able to hit him very much. That's pretty concerning for fans of the Cubs, I would imagine.
Yeah, and they really haven't hit Rich Hill in this series either. The one game he pitched, it was a shutout, combined shutout with the bullpen, but I think he went 5 or 6 innings in that game and really looked sharp. And he's got a great curveball, and they're not a good curveball hitting team. So we'll see how it all plays out. But first, of course, they have to beat the Dodgers. That is, have to beat the Cubs. And I guess it'll be Kyle Hendricks against Kershaw in Game 6. And if it goes to 7, then it'll be Rich Hill against Jake Arrieta. And Jake Arrieta was hittable. He got hit a little bit by the Dodgers. So there's got to be a little bit of concern there. And don't forget, if it does go to a Game 7, it would be paramount that the Dodgers get the early lead, because that would just put more pressure on the Cubs at home after 100 and whatever it is years now to win it. And they really wouldn't need that extra pressure put on. There's enough Game 7 pressure on them that you don't want to add any more as the innings dwindle away. And Rich, how about those Cleveland Indians winning the American League Championship? Lost one game on the way to the World Series. Terry Francona, boy, he's terrific. He just outmanaged everybody in these 2 series. He is just a terrific manager. Good postseason manager, manages butt off with the bullpen and everything. Brought in those guys at the right time, sent up the right pinch hitters, really did a fantastic job. And, of course, Andrew Miller was the MVP of the American League Championship Series. And they're sitting back and waiting, and that's not always a good thing.
Yeah, a little bit of rust maybe, but a lot of talk has been that the Cleveland Indians will be well rested for the start of the World Series. Of course, it seems like they've been off now for a couple days, and in this playoff season, it seems like that's more like a week or so. And it's only been a couple of days, but it just seems like such a long time. And we've seen that before with certain teams. They get a layoff like that, and they sort of lose that groove that they were in.
That's a concern, but it does another thing for them, though. It helps Trevor Bauer heal that pinky up a little more. I think there'll be like 11 days, so maybe that will help him so it doesn't bust open again. And they may get one of their starters back that was injured, that wasn't in any of these series so far, Danny Salazar. He is working out and throwing, and there may be a shot that they can get him back. And that would really make a world of difference for the team, because, you know, they had some really good young starters, and 2 or maybe 3 even got hurt right towards the end of the year. And they were questionable going into the playoffs about that. and here they might get one back, and they got the second big league start out of that kid Merritt, and he just put in some performance for 4 1/3, 4 2/3 innings, whatever it was, and so he'll probably play in some picture of the World Series. So um, they could probably use the rest to get some guys healthy, but as you say, sometimes that rust develops, and it's not a good thing.
And the Cleveland Indians were rumored to have been asking this person, if you're watching our video on YouTube, video version of the show, Rick Wild Thing Vaughn from the film Major League, uh, wanted to see if perhaps he would throw out the first pitch. And that was a rumor that was circulated on Twitter. Of course, in his Cleveland Indians cap and everything. But it was a great rumor, but it was something that apparently is not going to happen. Charlie Sheen was quoted as saying that he'd love to if asked, but he hasn't been asked yet to do that by the Cleveland Indians. So for now, that was just a baseless Twitter rumor that went around.
And he'd have to throw the first pitch over everybody's head, wouldn't he?
Well, hey, to recreate the show, yeah, maybe that would be something to get the fans into it and get the World Series kicked off really well.
And you'd have to have Bob Uecker do the game, call the game, so he can go just a bit outside.
Yeah, so that's one thing circulating around Cleveland. But another thing, of course, the World Series having not been in Cleveland for a while, the ticket prices around there have gone absolutely through the roof. There was just a broadcast on one of the Cleveland news shows, and they wanted to know how the tickets got so expensive and they got into the scalpers' hands so quickly. Uh, Rumored to go starting around 900 to 1,000 a seat in the aftermarket there, beyond StubHub, really. These prices are just really through the roof. But, the answer came down to its fellow fans that are giving up their seats. They're selling them for more money. And then the middleman is left holding the seats, and then he's got to try to make a profit. So it's a good old American capitalism, it seems like, at work there in Cleveland. And of course, the rumor is in Chicago as well, and probably LA if it happens. Those ticket prices will be just as high. So a lot of fever gripping the World Series ticket price market.
Yeah, and it's in one way it's a good thing. We can see the popularity of baseball in these cities. Of course, they're winning, so there's always popularity when you win. But it's still good to see, and it still shows that it's not as dead as everybody thinks it is.
That's true. There's always a big portion of the fans that are going to be supporting the game, win, lose, or draw, even if their team, is out of it. Like some of the smaller market teams that don't seem to keep up with some of these bigger market type towns, like the Chicago's, LA's, New York. They still support their club, so it's a good thing for baseball, and it's probably always going to be that way for the World Series as far as tickets and things like that. Another guy that made the news in this past couple days, Bill Murray, of course, big Chicago Cubs fan there, and he made his rounds around the White House recently. I'm not too sure why he was there, but he gave a press conference, a pseudo press conference in the White House press area the other day for some people, and of course, he made them laugh as well. He was comparing Chicago and L.A. During the fall times, and let's see if I have a sound bite to play on this. I had one ready, but of course, they disappear sometimes when you're doing a live show. So unfortunately, it looks like that live soundbite disappeared. But he basically said that trees tend to grow in the fall in the Illinois area, but in LA they just die. So got some laughter with that. But Bill Murray, a big Cubs fan, showing his support for the team. And of course, President Obama, who was a White Sox fan, wasn't too thrilled with him wearing Cubs merchandise into the White House. He had a Cubs hat and a Cubs jacket on when he went to visit there. And Obama just quipped that, he wasn't too thrilled with his garb that he was wearing.
Well, I'm surprised he didn't have him either shot or escorted out.
Well, that would have been a little bit much, even for a baseball fan, really. And wait, due to the magic of the internet, I think I found that clip. Let's just play a little bit
Right.
of what Bill Murray said at the White House press room just the other day. Here it is.
Mr. President, do you think the Cubs will win?
I feel very confident that Clayton Kershaw is a great pitcher, but we got too many sticks.
Really?
Yeah, and at home with our crowd, the weather.
Yeah.
We also you get a little bit of autumn in Chicago. You don't get that in Los Angeles. Trees just die in Los Angeles. In Illinois, they flourish. They perform. They show magic beauty of nature.
So that's Bill Murray there talking about how trees just flourish in the Illinois fall, whereas in LA, they just die. So it'll be interesting to see if the Cubs can pull this off. Of course, just one more game doesn't sound too hard, but it's very difficult when you need to just win one game, especially even if you're home, Gary.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure, and of course, there's pressure on the Dodgers, but not as much because they really have nothing to lose at this point. They're down a game. They have their ace pitching on full rest. So, if they lose, they can say, "Well, we had a great season. We didn't expect to get this far." If they win, it really puts a lot of pressure on Chicago in Game 7, and really kind of takes the pressure off of them in a strange way, because again, they're not expected to be there. They weren't expected. And here they are with a good chance, considering that they have Kershaw and Hill, and both will be on the day's rest, as will Hendricks and Arrieta. But, I based on history, you got to put your money on Kershaw.
Yeah, they've got to get through Kershaw to make it. It's going to be an epic Game 6, and if they don't make it, it's just all holds barred. It's just going to be an all-out war for Game 7. So it's a must for the Chicago Cubs to win Game 6, nail this down. They're going to have a couple days rest if they can do it. The schedule for the World Series has been released, starting Game 1 starting on Tuesday, October 25th at 8 p.m. It'll be the NL champion, whoever that may be, at the Indians, opening up the World Series Tuesday night. And it's always strange how they open the World Series on a Tuesday night, isn't it?
Yeah, it used to be years ago. Remember, it was on a Saturday. But I think they want to get those middle games on the weekend with the chance of a clinch. If it's a sweep, it would be on, either, let's see, a Saturday night or a Sunday if it went 5 games. So I think that's the thinking behind it. But I don't know. It's kind of crazy. You could go 7, you're on a Wednesday night, and I think it hurts your audience in a way.
Yeah, and I don't quite agree with that. I mean, you start off a series on a Tuesday night. That's where I think baseball, with the schedule, it's getting so late into the year now. If it went to 6 or 7 games, you're into November. I think maybe the talk of a 154 game season now is not as far-fetched as it could have been a few years ago, because it just seems like the season's getting extended every year just a little bit too much. You've got Cleveland and Chicago, if they end up to be the two teams in the World Series. It could be a very cold affair. I know in our area we're expected to drop 30 degrees from what we had in a 75-degree day. We're going down to like 45 in the Northeast on Saturday as we're doing the podcast. So
And rain could be another issue.
yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see if Major League Baseball deals with that, and they're just going to have to get finished by I think October 25th. That's a bottom line. You want to be finished with the season by, not go into November with some of these climates where you could have, theoretically, you could have snow.
Right. And there is a way to do it. They just don't want to do it. Well, the owners don't want to do it. They should play. If they took scheduled a double header, I think once or twice a month, you could shorten the season by at least 1 or 2 weeks, and then start the playoffs. And it still would get into October. You know, that's the whole thing. They wanna have it start in October, so it's October baseball. Well, then you either have to have more games quicker and no travel days, or you have to come up with a different plan.
Yeah, and I like your plan of the double headers and the 2-for-1 double headers, especially.
Yeah.
It seems like ownership nowadays treats that as, they would never do that. Give 2 games for the price of 1, which used to be pretty commonplace throughout baseball. The Twine Nighter started around 5:05 or 5:35, and you got 2 games in on a Saturday night or something like that. I don't see, if they didn't go to a 154 game schedule, your solution makes a lot of sense. I don't see why teams wouldn't do that, and not forsake the 162 game season.
I think the teams would. It's the owners that don't, for the reason that you said. They don't want to give 2 games for the price of 1. But if that's the case, then do a day-night doubleheader. Just play 2 on the same day. And then you run the risk, though. You get a game that could be over late and have a day game the next day, or a travel day the next day. Then the way to do it is, you say, on a Sunday, start a doubleheader at 1 o'clock, and chances it's over by 8 o'clock at night, and it's still early. And it doesn't have to be every week. I mean, when we were kids, it seemed like it was every week there was a doubleheader. Doesn't have to be every week. I think if you did 1 a month per team, I think that would be enough to shorten. I don't know. We ran it one time. We were talking about it, kicking around some buddies of mine and myself, and I think we figured it out where it would save a week or 10 days to the season.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they need to do. Move that up the week to 10 days. That's would be the plan to have it all finished by now. I think today's date in particular is very telling for Phillies fans. I believe that Phillies won the World Series on October 21st, 2008. So it just seems like since then the series has been going later into the month of October and even into November, with the possibility of that. But the Cubs' first appearance there since 1945. If they make it, as you said, they do have to win 1 more game at home. Not an easy task. And of course, some of you, by the time you listen to this podcast, of course, the game will be over, and it'll be just a bunch of history. But it's amazing. You had talked about a little bit about the jinx, the mystique of the Cubs losing that mystique, but I think they would fare well if they made it into the World Series, and we could sort of put a little of those mysteries to bed, just like the Boston Red Sox, who Terry Francona used to manage, the same way. The Red Sox, you would think about the jinx and Babe Ruth and things like that. They used to talk about that, and that's become a bit of history now. So it would be good to see the Cubs put that jinx stuff to rest.
But that would take the fun out of it, because that's part of the thing. You watch now to see how are they going to blow it. Is it really a jinx? Is this curse going to continue? And it kind of took the luster off of the Boston Red Sox, and the Cubs have always had that moniker of being the lovable losers, and if they suddenly become good, which they have become good, but I mean, if they go and win, then it's just another team. Then we start looking for another team. Like, would it become Cleveland then? But they got to the World Series at least. So would it be Arizona? Well, no, Arizona won a World Series. Who am I looking for? Who's the Seattle's never gotten to a World Series. They've made playoffs, never gotten there, so that they become the lovable losers. Is there a curse on them? It's just that I think it goes back to having the two oldest stadiums between the Red Sox and the Cubs, and these cool stories about how they have this curse put on them. And it just, I think that all goes out the window, and we tend in this country now to forget our history, and I'm certain that that'll get lost if 5 years from now the Cubs have won 2 World Series or 3. The newer fans, the kids aren't gonna. What are you talking about? The Billy Goat. It's gonna seem stupid to them, whereas now it's almost like a thing you learn from your childhood. The Cubs will never win because they're cursed by this Billy Goat. So I don't know. I'm not a Cubs fan going back to 1969 when they battled with the Mets and the Mets beat them. And of course, that was the Black Cat coming out in front of the Cubs dugout, stopping right in front of manager Leo DeRocha. And after that, the Cubs went on to lose a bunch of games, and the Mets went on to win the games and won the pennant and went on to win the World Series. Great year for the Mets, our first World Series. And I don't know. I just I'm still pulling for the Dodgers, and I really like the Cleveland Indians in the World Series. I think they could beat either team.
Very good. So they are waiting for whoever they're going to be playing in the World Series. Well, somebody who was waiting on scratching a lottery ticket, he happened to have been a Cubs fan, won $1 million while watching the Cubs playoff game the other night. A lucky Cubs fan, his name is Rick Kempke, 56, was home watching a Cubs game when he scratched off a $300 million cash spectacular ticket there in Illinois.
Wow.
He instantly won while he was watching the game. He bought his $10 instant ticket at a Speedway grocery store in South State Street in Lockport, Illinois, and he elected to collect that in a one-time payment of $600,000. So maybe a little bit of luck there, ready to show off there.
Or maybe that was all the luck they're going to get.
That could be. Interesting way to look at it there. But a lucky Cubs fan there with $1 million. But what's $1 million anymore? You only get 600,000 there if you elect it in cash.
I'll take it.
Not too hard to take, right?
No. I will take it.
Well, the other night and earlier before we started the show, there was a podcast on about home studios for podcasting. And Gary, you and I were talking about it a little bit before we started our podcast here this week, but they forgot to have us on the show.
There you go. And we both have new studios. So I guess we didn't let it be known that we should have it. But if they watch the show, I think everybody knows by now.
That's true. So maybe we'll be on a future show there with the Podcasters Roundtable. Ray Ortega, we're over here if you want to talk to
we
us.
are. And Rich, talking about the Red Sox and the Cubbies and the time that it's been, this week or October 12th, it was a person was born by the name of Eddie Carnett, and Eddie Carnett turned 100 years old, and he is the oldest major league living player, or oldest player to have played in the major leagues. That sounds better.
Oh, very cool.
He made his major league debut on April 19, 1941. You're famous in baseball because of Joe DiMaggio had his 56-game hitting streak that year. And, of course, Ted Williams hit 406 for the season. And he was a pitcher. He pitched for the Braves against the Brooklyn Dodgers. And not an easy test for him in his first game because he had to face three future Hall of Famers, Joe Ducky Medwick, Pee Wee Reese, and Paul Wainer. So he joined the Navy in 1945. It marked a premature end to his season with Cleveland, as a matter of fact. And unbeknownst to him at the time, it brought an end to his time in the major leagues. And he lives in Oklahoma now. He's been married for 75 years. And he just turned 100 years old, the oldest living major leaguer, Eddie Carnett. So happy birthday. Belated happy birthday goes out to Eddie Carnett.
Very cool. Doesn't seem that long ago, some of the old timers that stayed around baseball would play into their 40s, quite a lot. But I guess as the game has progressed and some of these players are playing harder and harder, it gets more difficult for them to last into their 40s. We do see the Ichiros and people like that doing that these days, but very few and far between. The demands of the game, it seems, have went up, and the level of play has went up. So you don't see many of those old timers like you used to maybe in the 80s or even in the 70s hanging on with a spot in baseball.
Plus, I think there's so much money now that they make enough that when they feel it's time to go, And I don't know if you saw the trophy ceremony for the ALC after the ALCS, but Frank Robertson was there, and I gotta say he didn't look good. He didn't sound good. It was like he was a little confused at where he was and who he was handing the trophy to, and it really was a little sad in a way. Thought the commissioner should have been there, but apparently Frank Robertson is the honorary American League president. Now, if for those young people out there that don't know, there used to be an American League president and a National League president, and they were two separate leagues. They were really separate umpires, separate everything, not just the designated hitter. They were separate, and they only met in the All-Star game and World Series. No interleague play, and that's the way it should have stayed. But they brought all of the both leagues under the umbrella of MLB. And I don't know. I kind of miss those days where there was an AL president and a National League president. And apparently Frank Robertson was announced as the honorary American League president. But I know he's getting up there in age, but boy, he did not look good at all.
Yeah, that's pretty sad. But, you mentioned that American League and National League president. That sounds appealing because you don't have one guy in charge of everything like a czar of baseball, so to speak. And, probably you wouldn't get the big changes as easily as have been coming down the pike for baseball as well, with the baseball replays and things like that. Even wanting to shorten the season and do other things. Just a split in power there is not a bad idea, really, even still.
Yeah, and I mean, it can go, it could be overseen, of course, by the commissioner, which it always was. But it just, I don't know. You would have to give them power, though. You just couldn't name it like they're naming, honorary um, president. And it's just, I guess it's just another thing that changed that I'm not certainly happy with. And it's been a while now. I mean, it's got to be 6, 17, 18 years perhaps. But it just seemed like it was a better idea at the time, and it had worked for years and years. And why they decided to change it, I don't know. I guess it was a branding thing, and everything comes down to branding and money.
Yes, it does. And as you said, you had some World Series history a few minutes ago on the podcast here, and some of the teams that haven't won the World Series ever. And I just happen to find myself on the World Series page here, so I'll go through the teams that have never won the World Series: the Texas Rangers, San Diego Padres, Tampa Bay Rays, Colorado Rockies, Houston Astros, Milwaukee Brewers, Seattle Mariners, and of course the Washington Nationals. All have never won the World Series. So there you have about 9 teams that need to win still. So even if the Cubs end up in this World Series and eventually go on to win it, we still have plenty of other teams that have never won it. So maybe we can pick on one of those teams in the future.
And how many of those teams has never been in it either? That's the real team you want to pick on.
And they actually have that listed as well.
I'm going to say Seattle.
Seattle is one of them.
Let's see.
Team very close to both of our favorite teams.
Washington Nationals.
The Nationals. Yep. Those are the two
/ Montreal Expos has never been in a World Series. Everybody else has been.
Yeah, at least once. The bottom 4 teams, the Rays, the Rockies, Astros, and Brewers, have been at least once in the franchise history. So a lot of history there with the World Series, and of course a lot of fun as well that you could discuss how many teams actually won the World Series. Of course, the Yankees with 27 World Series victories over their long career there. 40 series played. That's a tremendous amount for the New York Yankees. They practically owned baseball during certain periods of this game.
And Rich, if I may, that here I go. That brings up a pet peeve of mine.
Mm-hmm.
They took these records that used to be separate. They used to have World Series records were separate, and they merged them all together into playoff or postseason records. And it's a load of crap. I mean, Mickey Mantle had the record for World Series home runs, and now everybody blows by him because they count all of the playoffs. And I don't think that's right, because it's a different series. It's a different thing, the World Series, and they didn't have a chance for the playoffs. So how do you take those records away from somebody and mash them all up with all of the wild card and everything else now? And, and then I think it's Reggie Jackson has the record now. Well, no, I'm sorry. He doesn't. He may have it for the postseason records, but he does not have it for the World Series. Doesn't have the most home runs. I believe that if you could find it somewhere, that Mickey Mantle still holds the most home runs in World Series history.
Yeah, I would have the Yankees especially that year of the Yankees, really made appearances every year just about of Mantl's career, and wasn't Mantl's career even cut short by his service of the country even?
No, he didn't serve the country mantle, but because he was 4F with all the injuries that he had, and he had that uh, what was it called? Some sort of disease that really disqualified him from any military service. But he still played 18 years, but missed a lot of time with injuries. He always and still managed to hit over 500 home runs. And it's funny, they say it's as good as he was a Hall of Famer, that had he not been hurt as much, and really it started in his first season in the World Series. Had he not been hurt, because he was so fast, he could do it all. He might have been the greatest player of all time had he not had the injuries. And of course, as time went on, he didn't help matter as much with his drinking and carousing, and that and staying up all night and going to play ball. He didn't help his health issues, his injury issues, any. But I mean, they called him the Commerce Comet when he first came up. He could run. I forget what the time was from home to first, but he was unbelievable. And of course, he had the power. Still hit over 500 home runs. But the partying and the injuries did him in, and he said in his autobiography that the reason he lived life so hard was his grandfather had died, I think, at the age of 47. His father died at the age of in his 40s because they were coal miners. And he thought he was going to die young, so he was going to squeeze as much life as he could into those whatever years he had. And here, of course, he managed to play his whole career, and then really his liver was shot, and his systems just started breaking down, and very sad the way he passed away at the end. But he was some talent, and I just don't like. I know he plays for the Yankees, but when I was a kid, we didn't have the Mets. I'm an old guy. When I started getting into baseball, there was no New York Mets. So living in New York, you became a Yankee fan, and Mickey Mantle was the guy. He was everybody's hero, and that always kind of stuck with me, I guess, because he was the first guy I really was crazy about in baseball, and I always had a spot for him. Even though I became a Met fan and really hate the Yankees now, but there was always something about those old Yankees, Ruth, Gehrig. I mean. Those were great ball players, and they didn't whine, and now it's almost, and the fans didn't whine. Now it's almost, the Yankees have to win every year according to their fans, but I digress. But my point is that of all these great players that played in the World Series that never had these playoffs, I feel they're all getting shortchanged now. Even Babe Ruth and Whitey Ford, who had the most, I think it was shutout innings in a World Series. Now Whitey Ford broke Babe Ruth's record, but that was World Series. Now, I mean, now I don't know who owns the record anymore, because if they throw in the postseason and the World Series combined, it's just not right. Just doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah, and I was thinking Joe DiMaggio would service for the country, a Yankee, a fellow Yankee. But yeah, you are correct. I looked it up on the internet. Mickey Mantle does hold the record for home runs, 18 home runs, coming in second in the World Series, 15 home runs, none other than Babe Ruth. And then third, Yogi Berra with 12 home runs in their career there. Very cool.
And I think Mantle did it in the 64 World Series. I don't know if it tells you where you're looking, where he did it. But I believe he did it in the 60 World Series against Barney Schultz, a knuckleball pitcher of the St. Louis Cardinals. And I think that was the 18th home run. And the Daily News the next day had a 2-picture spread. And in one picture, they had a picture. They had Barney Schultz throwing the knuckleball. And it said, the caption was Schultz steals. And right next to it was a picture of Mickey Mantle swinging, hitting the ball. And it says, and Mantle cuts the cards. I'll never forget. And that home run won the game, I believe, in the bottom of the 9th or the 10th inning. It was a 1-1 tie, I believe. And Mantle hit the home run off for Schultz to win that game. And maybe the game 5. And I believe the Yankees lost that series in 6 or 7, because that was when they really were on the they won in 62 against the Giants. 63, they got swept by the Dodgers and Koufax and Drysdale. And 64, they played the Cardinals, and I think it went 6 or 7 games. And that was really the end of them then. That was they were all old, and they were finished then.
And I think you had talked about Reggie Jackson with his name, Mr. October. Of course, most home runs in a series, 5 in 1977. That's how he earned the phrase Mr. October. But he has company, because Chase Utley had 5 home runs in the World Series in 2009 for the Philadelphia Phillies. So, yeah, they rank right up tied with one another in most home runs in one particular series, with 5 total. Right behind them are a number of players that have 4. I'll just name them for you. There's about 8 or 9. Hank Bauer with 4, Babe Ruth with 4, Duke Snider, Barry Bonds. Lenny Dykstra had 4 in 1993 for the Phillies. Duke Snider, Willie Aikens with the 1980 Royals. Gene Tennis, that goes back to the Oakland A's back in 72. And then Lou Gehrig had 4 home runs in the 1928 World Series. I'm reading these on baseballreference.com. So, yeah, a lot of great World Series history there, and a lot of great memories as well.
And we'll see if anybody can top any of those records this year.
Yes, indeed. So we'll have our ongoing talk about the World Series by the next show. The World Series will already be started, and we've already made our picks. Gary went with the Dodgers because nobody else was. And I went with the favorite Cubs. So either way, I'll be happy to watch the World Series, and we hope you are as well out there, our listeners. And Gary, I know I mailed you something on this, but we're still with patreon.com. So if you'd like to support our podcast as a listener, you can go over to Patreon. It's patreon.com/baseball talk. That's our new page there, where you can sponsor our show, $1 or $2, $5 a month, whatever you like to contribute to the show. Become our patron on there, and hopefully we can get a lot of people to subscribe and patronize our show, because we're, like we've been telling you, we have some good ideas to improve the show and plow some money into it, maybe make it a little more interesting for you, the listener.
And nothing's cheap, folks. Nothing's cheap now.
Not even these home studios that we have.
That's right.
Thanks very much for listening. Enjoy the rest of the NLCS and, of course, the upcoming World Series. And the next time we talk to you, we'll be talking all about the World Series for 2016. Gary, have a great week.
You too, Rich, and I'll see you next time.